Hi, welcome to today's webinar. Thanks to all of you who are coming back from our previous webinars, and for those of you who are new and haven't been to one of these Whitespace human-centered digital transformation webinars, I'm going to give you a little bit of background before we dive in. This is the final part of a series of webinars. We started, last summer. We've been involved a lot on digital transformation projects with our clients, and we kept repeating the same things, and we met some really interesting people along the way. And so we thought, let's talk about some of these things outside our company and outside our clients and prospects, and share some of these ideas and get some good feedback and get good questions. So we started out with stakeholder alignment, talking about how we use a lot of things you're going to hear about today, design thinking practices to align stakeholders. We talked about service design. A lot of people wanted to hear about service design and how that was helping digital transformation projects succeed. And then we did a deep dive into discovery research and kind of research ops, like all the infrastructure and the methods and processes around how to do empathy better. It'll make more sense once we get going. I want to introduce our speakers today. So we're very pleased. We've got two great guest speakers. And our first is Michael McKay, who's the VP of Digital Products at Novo Nordisk, one of the world's largest and most successful pharmaceutical companies. And my colleague, Roos Müller-Durieux, who's a service design lead at Whitespace. And I'm Steve Ritchie, also a digital strategist at Whitespace. It's interesting that though, none of us started out in digital, and here we are after our degrees and our starting out of our careers, talking on a webinar about digital transformation, because that's where we work today, and we have for the past quite a long time. Michael started out in engineering, systematic product creation, product design, worked on the early Nokias. Those of you who are too young won't even know what those are. Michael, those were the 3200s, right? Or is it the...
Yeah. Yes.
3200. He was a design leader at Nokia, Yahoo, eBay, Amazon, PayPal. Michael's joining us from Copenhagen, but from those list of companies, you can tell that he did quite a bit of time in Silicon Valley. And then coming back to Denmark, he was the head of design at Ørsted, where he was the head of the Design Center of Excellence, and he built up a center of excellence there. And he's alternated between working inside big corporations and then going freelance and getting his hands really dirty. And as a freelancer, he worked with Lego, helping Lego implement strategic design on all the parts that aren't the toys and the bricks and the stuff, everything that runs the business of Lego. He brought strategic design to that. He's an adjunct professor at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts in the School of Architectural and Design. And now he doesn't have digital design in his title. He doesn't have design at all. He's digital products. So he's the head of digital products at Novo Nordisk. And we'll talk about that transition near the end, about moving from design to product. That's a shifted center of gravity that we're all dealing with. Thank you, Michael. We're really glad you can join us.
Thank you.
Roos has a very similar background in this. She started in industrial design also. So engineering, industrial design. Then she got a master's in interaction design, and she's a service designer. So Roos has not been doing the wireframing and the pixels and stuff. She's thinking of the larger picture, and she works a lot with large organizations, and her focus is on employee experience. Most of our big clients at Whitespace are internal. They're building tools, digital tools, to help their employees deliver value to their clients better. So that, I mean, I find it interesting that both of you are coming from service design, and that brought you those methodologies you learned in product design and service design are now moving into digital. Just that's your backgrounds, but can you tell me more? And we'll start with you, Roos. What kind of digital work and digital transformations are you working on today?
It's a good question. Yeah, so it's actually very often about why do products that are implemented not succeed? So why are users not happy with them? Why are users not using them as often, as much as preferred or as wished for? And actually taking a step back and redoing what should have been done at the beginning of a product launch to see, okay, what do users actually need, what do they want, and does it fit with the product? So that is really one of the high topics of projects that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. And some of them are, I mean, I've heard you talking, since we're colleagues, about some of the recent, but they tend to have more complexity than customer facing.
Yeah. I think a different complexity. So for example, we've been internally working on reflecting on journey management tools. And that is where it became so clear how some journey management tools are very customer facing and how that doesn't fit our work. How, for example, it's not about increasing the NPS of different touch points, but it's really about trying to understand what is blocking or what is motivating, what's helping an employee. And I think that very often it's easier to look at the broader context, because you're not only looking at a tool, but you're really looking at a tool on a laptop in the context of the working day. So yeah, I think it comes with different complexity.
Mm-hmm. And you also do a lot of user research too, as part of your work as a sort of.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Okay. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Michael, what about you? You've done a lot over the years. What's on your plate in terms of digital transformation today at Novo Nordisk? Oh, we just lost Michael. Whoa.
I think he jinxed it. Before it started, he already talked about the unstable internet connection. The worst that could go wrong.
He'll relog in with his with another Wi-Fi.
I mean, he asked us to sing in the meantime while waiting.
Well, Roos, I can ask you, when did you, do you remember first hearing the phrase design thinking?
Yes, I think so. I mean, maybe I just missed it during my studies, but it was funny that when looking for the first job, I saw it in the job description that also you should be familiar with design thinking. And I didn't realize that term was a thing yet. So I started reading into it, and then I realized that actually it's just a different way of telling the methods and approaches that I've been using from the study on. Just saw that it was easier, more simplified to communicate to the outside world than the different complex frameworks that we were using.
And was there anything, because you were trained in design, so
yes,
I'm wondering, was there anything new for you once you heard that phrase design thinking, or was it just a different packaging? Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you. We're all digital, aren't we?
Yeah.
So what I think was a big difference is, but it also comes with going from study, of course, into work, is the multidisciplinary teams that you're working with. And I think that works very well with design thinking, that you incorporate, involve different roles as part of your team, but also as stakeholders, also as users. And I think that, that worked just very well to prevent the work in silos, to ensure that barriers are breaking and that you work together towards a solution, instead of the designer by themselves with the users, but really co-owning the problem and the process, if that makes sense.
That does. And I can imagine it coming out of design school, that real world of messy stakeholders and agendas and politics was like, okay.
Yes.
Michael, we were talking about, I mean, we talked a little bit about, I introduced your background, but what are you working on now in terms of digital transformation?
Yeah, so as said, I'm the VP for digital products in our transformation unit for the largest area or like a business unit in Novo, which is the clinical development unit. So that's the side or the area that kind of works from first in human through all the clinical trials, all the way through submission into commercial release of pharmaceutical products. And so it's a pretty big logistic exercise. So we work with more than 10,000 medical sites across 80 different countries, and very kind of intricate and complex process to get everything working, and such a trial can last up to 5 years. and it's very critical for us to keep our patients engaged, because if too many patients drop off, we will not get the right quality of data, and the statistics won't work for us. So there's a lot in this idea of introducing user experience into this way of working. And the surprising thing is that it's not evident that the user experience was part of this way of working in the past. It's something that has come along with the digital. And that means that if you ask what are we working on, it's all the digital infrastructural tools. It's figuring out how to get the right consistent brand experience through a lot of SaaS environment, which is quite dominant in our industry. And that means that how can we actually take control of our patient and the HCP experiences as we lean into all these different SaaS solutions. So it's not only building stuff, it's also figuring out how to make a quite big digital portfolio work for our employees and other users as we lean into this buy versus build era.
That sounds like a perfect environment for design thinking as a reducer of complexity and builder of desirability.
Yeah,
right? I mean, because people don't have to use the tools that you're providing, do they? Or some they do. No, sometimes they're captive.
I think we are in you would call it in like in most enterprises, we are in what we call a mandatory environment, which means that people get the tools that they're supposed to use. Mm-hmm. But if that experience doesn't work, people will find all sorts of workarounds, which can become quite a risk. So they will invent their own Excel sheets or email chains to circumpass bad experience, which is really some of the things we have to do. We often talk about how UX in this environment, it's like, a classic, if it's like a picture, if you see a footpath in a park, if you haven't really laid out the pattern right, you will see all these pathways through the dirt, because people, they just tread their own tracks. And so when we work in the mandatory enterprise environment, we have all these complexities. So that's what we are working on, and that means that yes, I work for digital products, but it's actually digitalization, and even more, it's to get a human-centered setup that influences both the digital products we build, the products we buy, but also the development of business process in general. And that means that the digital transformation is a business transformation for most of these companies that go through this.
Okay, that's with that context. I think I want to just pause for a moment and not assume that all of our guests here on this webinar have the same understanding of design thinking than we do. So I'm going to take just a moment and kind of contextualize what we mean by design thinking. Just what are we talking about when we talk about design thinking? And I'm very aware that these are very misused and abused terms: digital transformation, design thinking, innovation. I have some of the same exhaustion and frustration with these terms as maybe many of you do. So that's another reason I want to just kind of talk through it and unpack it a little bit. And then we want to focus mostly on the value, where we see the value coming from this historical evolution that was called design thinking, and what's left today in 2025, and what stopped the value from flowing in the companies and the work we've been doing. And then look past 2025, look at what's going on now with AI, with more buy than build, and just see what's next. Where do we see these methods and mindsets that many of us learned in the last 20 years going forward? So let's see if I can get a big screen here. We can go like that. So design thinking, this is the very simplified version, but we can kind of see a roots of it pre-1990s, back when some scholars were starting to observe the way people are designing things. And those, at that point, it was mostly products. Wasn't the same mindset that scientists were doing in applying the scientific method, or business people were doing in terms of analyzing data and predicting with high degree of accuracy the output. It was a different way of approaching very tough problems that architects and product designers were doing. And they wrote about this. They analyzed this cognitively, what's going on, culturally, what's going on. And then in the 1990s, we saw there was an economic boom. So we saw a lot of money flowing into technology and into improving services, governments, healthcare, travel. And I've just listed one, IDEO, obviously. It was one of the first and biggest and did the most to spread this concept of design thinking. And then later in the 2000s, the British Design Council created the famous double diamond. We'll talk about that more later. And that's what a lot of people still retain as, oh, this is what design thinking is. It's just the double diamond. We'll talk about that later. And then the real golden era of design thinking was started in 2009 with the publication of two books, Change by Design by the founder of IDEO, Tim Brown, and a business professor, Roger Martin, up in Canada, who wrote The Design of Business. And both of them said, listen, these tools and these mindsets are so good and so useful with handling complexity and creating services and products that people will desire, that we don't need to let this sit with only designers and these design teams and these crazy studios with bicycles and Nerf balls and things like that. So they brought it into business. And then from 2009 to 2019, this was the business adoption of it. And for better or for worse, it got very popular. And this is when McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte started buying up design agencies and trying to integrate them for their clients. This is when I put here the Harvard Business Review. You know, when it makes it to the cover of Harvard Business Review, it's reaching its peak. And as an American, I can say this. I think one of the negative things was it also led to some very oversimplification. And there is a whole industry around boot camps and watering things down, making it trainable, teachable, checklistable. And this is a downside of what happened. So then I think the way I see it is that the value that still retained got absorbed after 2019. 2019, with the pandemic, we stopped worrying about design processes and we worried about, can I connect to my computer from my bedroom? That's kind of our, so we did that whole thing. And now we're in this digital transformation phase. And a lot of that got absorbed from design thinking. A lot of the principles of iteration, of empathy for users got brought into the product model that Silicon Valley Product Group is talking about. It got brought into a lot of ways of working, with now a whole generation of people going through business schools that have been trained in design thinking. And we saw the use of the term design thinking starting to go down. And that's kind of where we're at today.
Yeah.
The goal of all this evolution of design, going from those academic observing something's going on here that's very special, to a peak of design thinking, to now we're in the kind of we're in the realm of the product model meeting AI, was to build things that are not only feasible. So it's not only can we build it, it's will human beings desire that thing we're building, and can the business make money or save money and sustain this in the long run? So that was the goal of this whole trajectory I just showed of design thinking. Now, it was introduced as a mindset, and this is where we talk about the double diamond. I'll go through this really quickly. The thing we like about this, and this is what first caught my eye, was that what makes it a diamond was the opening of ideas and closing of ideas. So diverging and converging. So, and the other most important thing is that we spend the first half of our work reframing the problem, like rethinking, is this what really is the problem we're trying to solve? So designing the right thing, solving the right problem. And the longer I've been in the field of technology, I've seen beautiful solutions, gorgeous, efficient, viable solutions that aren't solving the problem of the users. And we're in that phase now with AI. And we always are when there's new disruptive technology. We always get into that phase where it gets tech first. But more than a method, it's also a mindset. And then the advantage of the method is, like I said, it's easy to teach. It's easy to replicate. It's easy to go teach people. Mm-hmm. Did you talk to 3 users? Yes. Did you do a 2-hour ideation workshop? Yes. Did you filter down your 10 ideas down to 1? Yes. And then in the afternoon, you've done the double diamond and you can go and say, I've done design thinking. What's harder is the mindset. And Michael, you've done a lot of work on mindsets, and I want to.
Yes.
Did you come at it directly? And this is your framework here for mindsets. Did you come at this, or do you come from a process approach and then move into looking at what's going on inside people's heads?
Yeah, actually, I think that what happened is that I started with these design sprints and working at very tangible ways. So my approach to design thinking has all the time been, yes, first you do some design thinking and you want to be practical about it. So you say, well, if this is an idea, how can we as quickly as possible go and test out this idea? Can we build something? Can we test it out? Can we do things? And so when I worked at PayPal, I was at a certain point, became the head of global design, and that was a function where we had design teams across the globe who started localizing the very, you could say, very American internet kind of payment system to fit the local country. So, for example, going to Italy, and we had so much credit card fraud that we said, how can we use the PayPal solution to help people get through this credit card fraud? Or in India, where we had so with bank accounts, so few bank accounts going on. And so I figured out to compress the design thinking, saying, well, I wanted to bring the A team, and I wanted to go into those markets where we really needed to learn. And so these 5 mindsets became a way that I managed to get through in this kind of taking people out for a week, bringing them to a foreign country, and then compress. And I also realized that we can do things in kind of a succession, but we can also just bring in the mindsets when needed. So I started dissolving this double diamond and say, well, we sometimes look at a problem and then we can look at it from a storytelling point. Let's tell stories about this problem we want to solve. Other times we want to start building prototypes about the problem to learn about it. And that means that the problem is at the center, and with the different mindsets you assume, you start getting people to really think in the same way about it, and then move around the problem. So that's what these mindsets got into. A little more advanced than the double diamond, but it has a core of that.
You mentioned people. Which kinds of people, as you were doing your tour around the world and you were working with people to solve these, who'd you get in the room?
It's actually quite easy, because if you think about the Venn diagram you showed before with the desirability, viability, and feasibility, you actually want to bring the crowd from your organization, at least one that can answer each of those questions. So it's something that the product coach Teresa Torres framed the product trio. But I mean, we have been using these trios for a while, even before we framed it. And it's really to say we need to get a person who can really speak up the feasibility. And so typically it's, we call it, both understands our tech stack and also understand what it would take to operate this product in reality. And the same goes for viability. You need a person who can understand what would it take to, what would this solution bring to our business? would it actually become as valuable as we hope for? And for desirability, bring people. It's customer service. It can be service designers. It can be UXers and even change managers who understand the people really well, so we can get that conversation going. So that's really the crowd that you would bring to this, and you would take people who would also turn around and go building the solution, and then maybe bring some specialists in that can help infuse some other kind of thinking in the group. But it's very important if you want it to become more than just thinking. You need to get the decision makers and the opinion leaders of the organization that's going to build this solution with you.
This all sounds very positive to me. This sounds like it makes a lot of sense, these mindsets. The illustration is engaging. I'm sure it wasn't all easy. And I'm sure that beyond people going through a process and a method, when it came time to starting to think differently, what were some of the mindsets that you found people struggled with the most?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of the very simple kind of things that we, as you could say, people who have practiced design for a while, find very simple. For example, the fact that you can start something without knowing where you are going to end up. So a lot of these hesitations that people had to go, for example, with me to India with PayPal, it's like, Michael, can you guarantee that we're going to have a new portfolio at the end of this week? And I said, no, but I can guarantee that we will not have it if we don't go there, right? Because you have to kind of get another kind of trust. You have to trust that that there's a guide that, and that's typically it's the design thinking facilitator. You have to see that person as someone who can guide the team through the unknown, and with their expertise, they will not guarantee what outcome you will get, but they can guarantee more or less where you will end up at the end of the week. So, for instance, when I did a lot of that work and learning at Lego, at the beginning of the week, I would ask them to call for a quite big meeting on Friday at 2 p.m., where we were going to tell the solution to the problem. And so they would invite their boss and the head of business and other. We would simply put it there, and then that was our deadline. And we would say we will work with this problem throughout the week, and at Friday at 2 we will show how close we got to a solution. And we never failed them at these 2 o'clock. But it does tell something about these mindsets that you have to bring in. Mm-hmm. Right, it's the unknown that is the biggest barrier for people to lean into design thinking, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Roos, what do you find in terms? I mean, you still struggle sometimes with clients, with stakeholders that
never
haven't adopted some of these mindsets. What are you? Do you also find the divergence difficult? Are there other mindsets that you've found are difficult for people?
I think it's a little bit similar of what I'm facing. It's really this this desire to skip all the steps and come directly with a solution. So we often have it that stakeholders are kind of hurrying, like, okay, awesome that you're doing more research. Let's converge. I want to see impact. I want to see results. I want to see output. And I think that this whole output-driven approach, way of working, that is challenging because of the fluffiness of design thinking. And I think that still companies or people do realize it. They realize it as soon as you, for example, have a solution that is launched and people don't use it anymore. So then comes the realization like, oh yeah, shit, we didn't think about what do people actually need, what do people actually want. Let's take 5 steps back. But we've done the projects, of course, about where we go through the process of design thinking, and it takes us a lot of time to get how to say, to get understanding, to get respect for the process, to say, hey, we have a process in place, we have to first diverge before we can converge, but also we can't do it all by ourselves. We can't right now leave, be in this black box and suddenly come up with the perfect solution. Especially as consultants, we need the context of the business, we do need the context to better understand, like going back to the diagram, to better understand the viability, to better understand the feasibility as well, but also the desirability. We know it from a couple of users, but we also need to understand how does it fit in the overall context of the company. So that is one way of how it's challenging for stakeholders, if they have this feeling of we have to do it more by ourselves and come up with the perfect solution. But I've also seen it the other way around for designers, that they are not familiar yet with this whole iterative, inclusive way of working. And they like to go into this black box and say, like, let's go, like what we talked about another time, the ivory tower. Let's go there, let's design the perfect solution, let's come up with something. But then the stakeholders are important, the users are important to reflect back to. And if you forget about the feasibility and the viability and really bring it back at the end, then the credibility of the process is not so high. So yes, I would say this whole not trusting the process, actually. Yeah.
I think there seems to be a personality and almost cognitive bias, right, towards cognition of letting comfort with letting things diverge. Clearly there are some people that love brainstorming all day long, and there's I think, Michael, you described it, and my first design teacher explained it, is that maximal discomfort when we just need to stop generating ideas and it's time to start pulling. And you can physically kind of start seeing when people start squirming and they're like, okay, enough is enough, let's fix it, you know, and they start. And I've learned to embrace that's really healthy, that you want someone to finally shut down your iteration and start closing that diamond down and filtering, Michael, as you would say, that filtering mindset, stepping back. I've struggled. I see a lot of people struggling with the empathy. Empathy is such an easy word and such a hard thing. I mean, trying to spend an hour with somebody and asking unbiased questions and really listening, that's hard stuff. That's hard stuff. And I don't think Michael, you were going to say something about
that? I can say that, but it's the empathy thing is that when all comes to all this in design thinking, we're trying our best to get this very kind of cross-disciplinary team to act like designers for a little while, so that they can build these experiences together. And one of the things is for the empathy is to take the entire team and let them feel what the users feel. And one of the issues that I always had with our big research investments that we tend to do as a corporate is that we send someone else out to do the reporting, and then they come back with graphs and stuff. And those graphs, they do not hit us at the heart, right? They hit us maybe in the logic. So a lot of my work for empathy on the Monday in these, if you think about the work as if it was a week, but so the week starts with empathy. So for me, it was hard hat. So when I work in a factory, it's like, let's get some hard hats out and then go and talk to the people who are involved, and simply go there and say, well, we've never gone there, or they don't have time, and we say, well, let's just go and be there a little bit. And then I ask people, it's a session. I say, well, what would you like to know, and how would we ask that? And then we write a number of questions down. And then I said, oh, that's great, because now we have a research guide, and I've invited a couple of people in, and then we sit in the room, and then we help create this kind of a user research situation where people, they really start to feel with the user. Or we can go and do some where they try out the experience themselves, which is often in B2C happening. It's more difficult in our enterprise setup to get people to act like one of the specialists. But there's a lot of that where we need to get people to feel what what's up with the user rather than just understand it with their cognition and their logic.
Yeah.
Can you see that, follow that, Roos?
Yes, yeah. For me, it's interesting because I was thinking about design sprints that I've also organized in the past, and how it was a great start to have the whole team involved in the user testing. That was already helping people to co-own the problem, so to say. But then we started to introduce also small interviews before the start of the design sprint, and then throughout the design sprint. And then over time, you can really see that, hey, it becomes more of a mindset, where a developer is discussing with another developer about, hey, that is not what the user wanted, so let's move to something else. And I think, that is great if you can do that in that way. We try to include stakeholders or SMEs a lot in interviews as well. It's not easy because it's most often not seen as a priority, but when they join, it's really great because they start to understand what's going on, and this empathy, what you're saying, it becomes more alive. And I think it can just be one interview, 1 hour, and you can already see that there's so much more connection to the problem itself.
Yes.
Yeah, that is great. And then I always at the end do like 10 minutes of, hey, maybe actually the other person has some questions to ask. And then, I don't know, you see this already in the posture, like, oh, actually, yes, I can also do this. Yeah.
I think that it's when we get into enterprise, because we also have to understand that a lot of the design thinking started in the consumer orientation, right? So, and one of the things that we do a lot in enterprise is we need to understand there are multiple layers of users of a digital solution. So obviously there are the people who are going to use the product. For example, if it's a reporting tool, that someone will go and do some work in the field, and then they're going to enter some data so they can report on it. But in reality, there are also many other users. So there are data specialists back home who are going to use the data that flows from it. There are leaders who are going to do sometimes very difficult decisions based on data that comes from it. And that means that what we then tend to forget, or that we could forget in our design thinking, is to only look at the people who will touch the product, but we need to get the full circle round and understand the intricacies. So I talk about an product enterprise fit and a product user fit, and we need to get both of these fits working well. And that's the balance that we have to add to our enterprise design thinking, compared to the more simple ones where we want to get a single or a double user setup. Like if it's a rental, house rental, you have the house owner and the house visitor, and you have to have both of their needs met. But if it's in an enterprise, you have multiple layers of needs that you need to understand, and you need to balance that into one solution.
Yeah.
Roos, this is not new for you as a service designer, is it? This front stage and backstage, right?
Yes, that sounds so simple. Exactly what Michael said. Like if housing, it's easy. You have a renter, you have someone who rents out, but who owns it. But with especially, I think, internal tools, you have so many different parties to the tools. You can. We had this project about a tool where you have. It's collecting data from all different sources, and then every source comes from a different tool, and that tool has also different types of users. So already mapping out who actually is part of this tool, who is actually the user, what kind of segments and what kinds of personas you have, is a lot of work. I wouldn't recommend to start with mapping that all out. That's a lot, but prioritizing them to see, okay, what are the most important needs that need to be met? What are the most important tasks? That's always very helpful. But the mapping, the different aspects, the different users that have to do something with a tool. And then I think that internal, or maybe it's also the type of work that we do, that we also work a lot with shop floor. So meaning at the factory, just on the floor, there comes another level of complexity, right, that you often see with service design. So how are the digital tools used in the context of the factory, for example? I was thinking before, I of course thought about all design thinking and reflecting on all the projects. And there was this this project that we did on the shop floor where we talked about a tool that they said the tool itself is fine. The problem is that it's on a computer that is fixed. They have to have readouts from a machine. The machine is far away from the tool. The readouts are very complex. So they always had to get another person who would stand next to the device itself, another one who stood next to the machine, and then they can shout to each other what the data is that needs to be filled in. And then the tool can be amazing, but if it doesn't fit the context of the different types of users, then you have another problem again. So that was very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think this is one of what we.
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to comment that we got this, like some of this kind of criticism that design thinking got over the years. A lot of it was that it became theoretical, and when you stand there in the middle of the factory and you observe and you understand what are these problems, that's when it actually starts to become very valuable. And the other thing, Stephen, you asked about what are the barriers that I see. One of the other things, I talked about the readiness to step into the unknown and step into something where we don't know how it's going to end. Another barrier that's very important to address is this, the fact that people feel that the solutions they have to be of very high visual kind of fidelity, so that it has to look really picture perfect. And one of the things that I've trained organizations a lot is to actually lower the expectation of what a solution can be into, for example, a hand drawing instead of a computer-aided drawing, or also a reduce the complexity of what we are trying to build. So instead of building a system with 10 buttons, we might actually simulate a system with only 2 buttons, so that it becomes more simple and that people can actually accept that these kind of solutions are also solutions. Is where some of that criticism came from, when people don't understand that when you lower the fidelity of a solution so that it's more coarse, you can actually invite a lot of people to participate. Whereas if you heighten the fidelity, you become more exclusive and unapproachable as a solution. So there's a lot of these finer details that you have to teach your colleagues when you start design thinking, because if you can get to very simple solutions that you can test out, then you can get much faster cycle speed. So you could try your idea out 3 times in a day instead of that the more expensive and difficult prototype maybe take a week to produce. Then you would only test it once in a project. Whereas if you can test it with more coarse prototypes, you could do many times and get that iterative mindset going. And that's it's really what I addressed, is that the mindset of iteration is something, if you can adopt it, then suddenly everything starts to get easier. The same with the mindset of storytelling, that people can start tell stories about things. You will see the ideas start to flow through your organization much faster than if they don't have a story to accompany them, those ideas.
Michael, you just mentioned colleagues and ideas flowing through the organization. One of the people listening to the webinar has asked, how is design thinking sold to an organization? Specifically, who does it? Is it something you train people on so they can do it themselves? Or do you advocate that an expert is required? We'll start with you, Michael, and Roos, we can talk about some of the work you've done with large organizations.
Yes. Well, in my experience, and I think it's you had the nice timeline for design thinking, Stephen. So I'm not selling design thinking tickets anymore. I sell problem solving and de-risking. Right. So we talk about, let's de-risk this project through, for example, discovery, and then what we do is a lot of tools from the design thinking toolbox. So that's the first of all. I have also noticed that design thinking gets just the word design makes people in large enterprises feel like Michael, we're not thinking about making beautiful tools. Why do we need a designer? That's what I've heard people say a while. So when we talk about the work we do and the outcomes we go for, it's much easier to, you could say, sell it. That's the first one. You need someone who is really skilled at facilitating design thinking. So the participants should be authentic, real people who would actually go and do the product, so they have the contextual knowledge and also the skill and practice to build the solution. But then you need at least one design thinker and maybe two that really understand how to interpret it, how to twist and turn. When you go through your sessions, what you don't want is someone inexperienced who sit and look in the manual and say, oh, now we're supposed to start diverging again. And then because there's so many ways you can misinterpret these tools if you don't have someone who actually has tacit knowledge. And I say, well, it is like you, I repeat, if you want to go into the jungle, you want to bring a really skilled guide with you that know what a jungle can bring, right? And that's what a skilled design thinker is. But obviously, you want to teach your colleagues how to become a great design facilitator. So I say first you learn that we can teach it for their own use, and then when they've used that in their own projects a while, then we can go in and help them figure out how to facilitate with more people, which is always more difficult. So that's the way. So there's a lot of good methodology to it, and it can get very practical.
Thanks, Michael. Roos, do you see anything similar with the large organizations you're working with as they try to push these kinds of, as Michael would say, problem solving and de-risking mindsets, mostly in their digital organizations? What are you? Who's doing it? Is this, and what's the role of specialists? Like,
So I think I would say that a combination is perfect. So talking about having experts and talking about training people to do so. So what I've done in the past is that we trained large amount of people in big organizations, and not so much to say, hey, they can take over our work, but more a little bit of design thinking or a little bit of user research is better than none. That was a bit the mindset. So let's have at least some foundation, and then hopefully that will lift the projects up. And then for the more complex projects, we have design thinking experts who will execute projects. That's so to say. So I think that there is still a big advantage, of course, of having design thinking experts. I think that I completely agree actually with what Michael was saying, that it is not easy to learn in a workshop how to do this. It comes with a lot of refinement over the years, a lot of experience, and also we in Whitespace, we're continuously looking at how do we execute design thinking? Do we see more tips and tricks into improving the process, into the fine details? But I do think that there is a lot of value into having this mindset implemented already. If someone thinks, hey, let's design a product, maybe we first want to talk with 5 people before we actually design the product. Or maybe I designed something awesome. Let's ask at least one user for feedback. It's already better than none, right? So this combination is something that I would advocate for.
I think, I mean, Roos, we've talked about this a lot, is the damage of design thinking as it was practiced kind of in the golden era is a defunding of the work of designers, people who are skilled in a craft of that know the visual or the product or the digital language of whatever they're designing. And people go to a 4-day workshop, they come out, and somehow at the end of all this, users still are not delighted and desiring the products and the services that we make. And I think the more we're focusing on measurement of real outcomes. We're seeing the demand for real designers come back. So people say, oh, what's the outcome? Did we really, really meet these needs? Oh, no. So our theater made us feel really good about checking that we were doing that, but we didn't actually change behavior of users at the end. Also, Michael, I want to this question about AI.
AI, yes.
In a way, AI is reducing the complexity of the building the things right.
Yeah.
And so in a way, it's focusing more attention, for at least most of our clients, on are we designing the right thing?
Yes.
And also at the same time, it's pushing design down because it's a tech first obsession right now. We saw this with the personal computer. We saw it with the internet. We saw it with mobile. It's kind of a, it's a phase. Once people start failing with AI, then they kind of say, well, who can help us not fail again? And I think we just had a question about AI as an enabler.
Some question, and I think that there are two ways to think about AI when it comes to digital products and digital solutions, because one of them is that it is an enabler that you have to start thinking about. That is other type of solutions and other ways to interact with digital products once they are AI enabled. So, for example, prompt-based interactions with products, or AI agents that you can start releasing and do things for you in products that was unheard of in the WYSIWYG phase. So that way, like a rethinking interaction and what you can allow and hope that users can do. That's one way. So it's rethinking the solutions so we get the best out of what the AI can do. That's one area. And I think it's not about design thinking. It's a genuine design craft that we need to do, but we need to add that as opportunity cards into our design thinking workshops, that hey, now it's not only these kind of solutions, it's actually also these over here that we could consider when we want to figure out how to best solve the problems. But what was also asked is before the design work, how can we use AI? So, for example, a lot of what has prevented people from effectively building empathy through research has been the time spent filtering out and figuring out what the people were actually saying. And I think the large language models are ideal to figure out things. I had this example. I worked in North America for a commercial organization, and I found someone in product marketing had done 45 90-minute phone calls to pediatric clinics, and we wanted to figure out something about what's going on in the minds of these people. So we were able to scan all of these interviews and then figure out those few places where they talked about the friction points to opening new treatments. And that's something that would have taken months, and you could never have done that. And here we were able to run that in minutes. And that's something that now you can start to build much better empathy models and through AI. And post the workshops, you can simulate and the work. For example, we did the other day, I got some statements, story point statements, and I was able to refit that into an Amazon press release a text model, which normally takes a while to sit and make a write, and that was done online or like inline. While we were doing the conversation, I was able to set that up. So AI can really accelerate our design thinking work for sure, but we need to learn what to use it for so that it doesn't dull us down.
Yeah, Roos, I know you're using some tools for exactly as Michael said, streamlining and even removing bias or reducing bias and going back to the real quotes and the real. Can you share a little bit? We don't have a lot of time, but can you share a little bit about how you're using some of these tools and the summarization features in AI?
Yeah. So it's a little bit all over the place. So we're trying out different ways of using AI to help with the analysis and the synthesis of research, for example. I think that there is still how do you say it? Could you call it a risk or a different way of working? Where for me, it's very important still to really analyze the interviews myself and decide and create the insights. But I also know that it can definitely help with already creating some kind of summaries, some kind of clusters, potential insights. It can guide. And it's funny that I've used it also a lot when I was struggling with, hey, we have a couple of insights, but we're not still understanding how do they relate to each other. And then ChatGPT is actually awesome to try out to say like, hey, these are actually the problems. What are the relationships that you can find? And it's not always perfect, but it does help you think in a different way, especially when you are a whole day by yourself doing the synthesis. Then it's like an extra sparring partner that you can use. It's also something we use AI a lot. We do now a lot of projects where AI is a lot involved. And then there comes a different challenge where people don't really trust the outcome of the AI yet. So how can you then do a research project about, or a design thinking project about, why do people not trust the outcome of the AI, and how can you increase this trust of it? Or do you even need to increase the trust and skip the whole AI part of it? So yes, those have been very interesting projects, setting up a new framework of, okay, how can we ensure that the data output of tools where AI is heavily involved is trusted by the users? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
maybe a little
yeah.
bit strict.
And I think this is a really exciting time for us all because, like I said, it is such a tech obsession, and we're just over that first hype cycle. So, we're getting more demand for, okay, but how can we make it desirable? How can we, but then also, how can we just generate, also it's tech first in that we have all this cool functionality. Let's just generate a bunch of ideas. And we're being brought in by some of our clients, as you said, like opportunities. Michael, let's take our opportunity cards and just start generating concepts, and then we'll start filtering it through. Because we only have, 3 minutes left. Are there any other, I don't think we have any other questions from the audience. We're not going to have time to, there's some really meaty ones. So listen, I think
for another webinar.
yeah, I mean, I think if we have two takeaways, and we said, go deep and go broad. So one is go deep, still focus on doing the hard work of solving real problems. And Michael, you said, we don't need to use the word design thinking. We don't need to use the religious approach. Just like, let's apply it to some hard problems where we don't know the outcomes. And then I think it's going to have to be a whole other webinar, Michael. We'll talk more about getting it up to the cultural level. What happens when we scale beyond teams?
Yes. But I think that it's the core. I think we should just give a little kind of snippet of the culture work. Like, so I talked about that, how we need to skip this religious following a process and saying it's more the different mindsets that are involved in the design thinking that you can then start more freely apply. And we talked about how you need to play it more like a jazz band will play its music. So it's more about getting so well rooted in your methodology that you can start to improvise and kind of collaborate in other ways. So that's one of the things. But it's also where you apply your design thinking. So we came from product. So that means that in the organizations we always start in product, and that means that we build trust that we can do meaningful things with our design work through product. But then we often you will see that we will transcend and start working on processes. That's where the service design comes in. And once we have started to prove our right there, then we can start to work on strategy, where these methodologies are also quite efficient. And that means that there's a whole ladder of levels of engagement in a company where you can actually start to plow your way in, and that becomes a recipe for transformation for sure.
I think that's a good teaser for potentially a next webinar series we'll do on moving up that cultural ladder. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. Thanks, Roos, for joining us as well. We got to maybe 80% of what we wanted to, but I think it was a useful conversation. And we hope those of you who are listening in live, or those of you who are watching this video tomorrow or in the next few weeks, find something useful from this. If you have questions, if you want to know some of the sources we've talked about, some of the references we made, the website is there for Whitespace. You can contact us through the website. And stay tuned. We look forward to doing these webinars, and we'll start planning the next series soon. So thank you very much. All of you have a good evening or morning or afternoon or wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.